Hey Luke, how's it going?
Hey Yvonne, how's it going?
It is great. It is so beautiful today in Canada. So, the last couple podcasts, I've talked about how freezing Canada has been. And just like my emotions, it has changed completely. And we are now plus 10. So, it is just so beautiful out.
I know because last week it was like minus 37 or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It really it's like my emotions. Like we just don't have one point and we're just up and down all the time. So, not that I'm saying that's great to be emotional like that, and we should probably get a handle on that. So,
Well, talking about emotions,
yes.
our wonderful guest today, who definitely is known for dealing with all things emotions, all things minds, all things everything. Who is it?
We have Keith Macpherson. He is a author, life coach, speaker, musician. He is from Canada. He is my Canadian neighbor, so he's actually only an hour away from me, so that's awesome. He is a guest on our show, episode 14, where we're going to talk about mindfulness. And I'm so excited to have him because there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, with a change of season, we all want to be prepared for that next stage of life that's coming. But number two, we're coming out of a pandemic, right? Like where tides are turning, we're excited. And so we want to make sure we're at our best for the world. So I'm excited. Keith, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. What a blessing to be spending this time with both of you.
Thank you. So we have a couple things. Number one, I just want to chat about this for 2 minutes. You are a musician, aren't you?
I certainly am a
And you
musician
were
since the age of like 4 years old.
right. And so I got to listen to you speak live, and you had a song that you sang at the end.
That's correct.
So, okay, it had, now I don't remember the name of it. It had something about the stars in the sky.
Oh, yeah.
What song was that one?
That's my song called Shine. That's on my record called Shine. And it was a song that was divinely inspired by a number of different things. But yeah, I love that you're naming that. That song has a lot of meaning to me. It
Yeah.
was really, yeah, ultimately inspired by my friend's daughter, who was going through a really tough time, and she was 14 and she just broken up with her boyfriend, and she happened to be in the room that I was in and just totally down on herself. And this song just emerged to remind her that she's a diamond and that she is going to be all right. And so this song just streamed through. I could go on and on about it, but I love that you named that song. Thank you.
I love that song. I thought it's what really stood out to me is that the song Shine, and now that you said that, I remember that. Um, what I love about that is it really relates to who you are as a person and what you bring to the world, right?
Mm.
And so your book that you have written, which is called Making Sense of Mindfulness, right, is allowing people to just really bring out parts of them that they have never gotten to experience before. So tell me, when you started this journey on your book, in doing it, being a speaker, what was the tipping point for you that kicked you off on this journey that you're on?
Well, I spent the first part of my life as a musician professionally. So I traveled all over the world. I was in a band called Keith and Renee, and we made 6 albums. We did a record deal. We opened for some pretty amazing artists. And it was probably early 2000s. We were out on the road and things weren't going as well as they had been. We were struggling to make ends meet. We were out on the East Coast of the United States on tour and realizing no one was coming to our shows. All our music was getting digitized in the Spotify, Apple Music movement. And I remember just feeling like so down and confused about like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? And right around that time as well, my mom had given me an audio CD to play in our rental car. So I put it in, and it was Dr. Wayne Dyer, who ended up being one of my huge mentors. He was talking about the power of positive thinking and motivation. And something shifted on that tour. I remember being on the tour, and although we were making next to nothing and we didn't really know exactly what we were going to eat the next day, I just felt like there was something about this audio CD that I kept listening to on that tour. And all of a sudden, just these little miracle moments were happening on the tour. And it was sort of like this transitional moment where I knew that something was shifting. I didn't know what, but something in my mind started shifting. It was like a switch happened. So that was the first piece. And right around then as well, I spent a summer singing on the Canadian TV show Canadian Idol, which is similar to American Idol and all the other idols. Maybe there's a British Idol or whatever. And on that show, I made it down to the top 22. And I didn't really realize like the intensity that it was going to be. I spent the summer on there and there was cameras always filming and it was just total Hollywood glamour. It was a lot of fun at the same time, but there was a moment right when I got, as they say, eliminated from the show, where I also had a turning point. It was like I realized that I had been striving this whole first part of my life to be famous, to be rich, to be seen, to be loved, to be needed, to be held. And I just realized I was going down this track that was just serving what I would call my ego. Not to say that I just don't have one now, but I didn't realize that was playing out. So right after that, it started shifting, and I actually got into the practice of mindfulness through yoga. I was practicing yoga, and I became a huge fan of the practice, and I ended up teaching it. And from there was a group of teachers that were coming to my classes at the studio. They were school teachers, and they asked me if I wanted to lead a session on mindfulness. And I'm a total yes guy. So I said, yes, of course I'll do that. I didn't know much about mindfulness. I heard it in the yoga circles, but really didn't know what it meant. So the session that I did with them ended up being us sitting around in a circle going, what does mindfulness mean to you? Because I had no idea. And I came away from that session and realized I need to figure out what the heck this word means. And it sent me on this quest. And if you were to fast forward tape, I ended up writing a book on it called Making Sense of Mindfulness, which really was part of the quest. And it just continues, that things are just opening up since I started that discovery. It's like, it does feel like a road to Damascus, honestly.
Yeah, I was just, I was thinking that, and Luke and I had our podcast episode last week where we talked about what is a Damascus experience. And your experience beautifully explains a Damascus experience. It's where you are living life one day, like one way, and then you have a change that totally changes the course of how you live life. And not in a radical sense, but in a something happened where I'm not thinking, my perspective has changed in life. And now I'm looking things in a different way and at different heights with different lenses. And so, yeah, wow, what a great story. What a great example.
Yeah. And one thing that I picked up on, Keith, as you were speaking about, the first part of your journey, let's say the beginning of the road was about becoming famous, chasing what I would call like worldly things, to fill a void within. And you describe it as the ego, right? What's been the big difference, like the big realization that you've noticed in yourself about kind of, this is where I was, and kind of like, why were you chasing them things, and now where are you in this position? Does that make sense? So where are you now in terms of chasing them things?
Yeah, well, it's an ongoing thing, isn't it, to wake up to who we really are and the essence of who we are. I would say there's been a number of awakenings along the way. So it wasn't just like a one moment shift, although I thought it was at the time after Canadian Idol. But even as of this past week, I feel like I'm having another version of a Damascus experience where I thought I knew the spirit. I thought I knew God. And I realized, like, I know God intellectually. And for a long time, I thought God was this like man in the sky that's like kind of looking down and has all power. Just recently, there's another version that has been coming in of God is not just a thought in my mind or a man in the sky. It's like God is everywhere, and there's no beginning or end to that presence. And so, the qualities, to actually feel the qualities of God, are like love, gratitude, joy, forgiveness even, and to actually feel that, not just think it, but to actually feel that, I grew up Catholic, going to Catholic school. Ironically, I went to St. Paul's High School, speaking of St. Paul and his Damascus experience. And only now am I starting to make sense of what all of those words were about. And, so it's a gradual thing that's shifted over time, which, all things are possible with God. There's no end to what you can create when it's of that love presence. I mean, it's co-created, it's happening all the time. So I could go on and on, but this has really been a Damascus experience. I come back to that, Yeah.
Wow. Luke, we could just let Keith talk for the last hour and he'd be
I
on
know.
brand with everything we talk about. Like
Mm.
you were saying, you were speaking our love language of Damascus experience right here, where we believe that the presence of God is so real and so tangible. It's all around us, when we spend a lot of our lives looking in the world for things that we actually have already inside of us, that He has placed there, and we talk about, we don't conform to the ways of the world, but what we do is we actually go and be part of the world to bring our value that we already have inside of us to unlock value in other people, right? And that's how we build. When we unlock things in other people, we build other people up, and that's bringing heaven to earth right there. And so I love all your examples. You're just, yeah, it's all the feeling. And so we had in episode 12, if you're listening to this episode right now, go back and listen to episode 12. We talk about hearing God, how you can start walking in, hearing Him for yourself in every day, and how you can be guided in that. Because I think it's important. It's really going to match up with everything we're talking about with Keith today. Because when you hear God, you have the mindfulness of God. It mirrors together. It brings it together in such a way that you are now walking in a Damascus experience, and each experience builds your faith greater and greater to do greater and greater things that God has called you to do.
Mm.
Yeah.
I was thinking, you spoke about, obviously your topic is mindfulness, and Yvonne just mentioned something in terms of, and it reminds me of Romans 12:2, where it says, "Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." It's this
Yes.
process of not conforming to the way that the world thinks and does things, but a process of renewing the mind and allowing God's will to flow through you. In terms of mindfulness, because my understanding of it, in one sense, I know you're the expert, is it's this process of letting things come in and kind of letting things back out. So dive a little bit more into what is mindfulness and how maybe could it relate to kind of that scripture in terms
Yeah.
of renewing the mind.
Sure. Well, when I first started out on the quest to figure out what does mindfulness mean, I asked
Mm.
a lot of people in that first session, even, what does mindfulness mean to you? And the answers I got back were all over the map. Someone said, mindfulness, that's that practice where I sit on a meditation cushion and do nothing. Like, why would I ever do that? I don't have time to slow down and do that. Someone else said, that's that strange practice where everybody sits in a circle and you're given a raisin and you slow down and smell the raisin and you feel the raisin and then you taste the raisin. And I was weirded out. I'm like, I have no idea what you mean, but I was just nodding with it. Someone else said mindfulness. I do it every day. I check it off my to-do list in the morning and I've done my mindfulness practice. Wow. Like, I had no idea. I think over time, what I found mindfulness to be, it actually was best defined by a children's author named Susan Kaiser Greenland, who says mindfulness is paying attention in the present moment with kindness to yourself, other people, and the world around you. That really landed for me. I think there's a grain of truth to all of those descriptions I just shared around, sitting on a meditation cushion and tasting raisins and even carving it out of your day so that you formally are doing it. But what exactly is it? I mean, to me, mindfulness is this state of coming back into presence, this present moment. And we're in a culture right now that has been conditioned to not be in the present moment. The average human mind, according to the studies 11 years ago, wandered 47% of the time out of the present moment. So when you think about that and add on all the technological advances that have happened with Facebook and scrolling and all that, and then the pandemic, I am pretty convinced that we've shifted past that 50 percentile mark into we're not in the present moment more than half our lives. So what that means right now is, as you're listening to this podcast and as we're speaking, I mean, you're missing out on half of the conversation right now. We're gonna have to do this all over again because our mind has checked out of the building. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's important that we plan what we're going to be doing and having for dinner and, learning from the past. But oftentimes with mindfulness practice, the reason it's so important is because when we shift out of the present moment into another thought form, unconsciously, accompanied by fear, doubt, worry, lack, shame, all these feeling lower emotions, the story of what we think could happen, or, feeling so guilty about what happened. What happens then is we're in the state of fear, and it totally wreaks havoc on our consciousness, on our nervous system, and on our connection, most importantly, to what we've been talking about, which is the spirit of God and of love. So to me, mindfulness, if we were going into the scripture of be still and know that I am God, that has really become the evolution of why the world's being called to practice mindfulness, is to slow down and to show up present, because in this present moment, that's where all of the great clues about who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to serve, that's where they are. They're all here right now in this moment, if you're paying attention. So to come back and expand. And so that's what, when you talk about like clearing out the mind or condition, it's because we adopt all of these conditioned patterns over time. We are in this whole story of fear that gets recycled every day on news programming and in our conversations about what's not working. So it's this invitation to catch yourself when you're going into those thought patterns and pause for a minute and go like, is this really the story I want to be telling? Because at the end of the day, you are the story you choose to tell yourself, So is the thought in your mind a thought that's building you up and connecting you back to this place of spirit? Or is this thought beating you up? It comes back to that discernment process, the either love or fear. So there's a lot to unpack with this topic, but it is an entryway that I feel is really accessible for people to start becoming more discerning of where they're focusing their attention. And ultimately, I find this path can lead people to open back up to the spirit, which is such a liberating thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Here is some information maybe you guys didn't know. Do you know that in the Bible, the word fear not is in there 365 times? That is why mindfulness is so important. And there's no coincidence that fear not is in there 365 times, because we focus so much on fear that we need a daily reminder not to fear. And mindfulness is a great practice on how to change that, right? It's such an alignment with God that we don't realize the need to focus off of fear, off of ourselves, and right back into the presence. So I love everything you're saying. Can you give me some examples, Keith, on how you practice this yourself in your life daily?
Absolutely. My mindfulness practice has evolved over time. So initially, when I started doing this, I tried to carve out a few minutes in the day to just sit and be still. And I started by just focusing in on my breathing. That is called an anchoring practice, where you're literally just starting to train your mind to pay attention in the moment, because our mind tends to wander. So whenever your mind wanders in this practice, you just come back to your anchor point. And for me, it was my breathing, because that's happening consistently in the present moment. Other people choose to make their anchor point, you could have a glass of water or a candle burning, and you just keep your focus there. And when your mind wanders, you go, oh, no, we're coming back to the anchor. And what that does, even scientifically now proven, is it creates new neurological pathways in the brain. and it starts forming what's called neuroplasticity. So the more we focus on something and repeat it, it becomes a pattern that's realized, and that's how all of our habits form in life. So the initial entryway for me into mindfulness practice was to learn how to focus my attention, because my energy flows where my attention goes. So that's the most basic practice. And then from there, as your attention starts becoming more present, you start finding that what I would call maybe the field of your energy starts expanding in the present moment. So you start becoming aware, and over time you start getting more in touch with what I might call your intuition, like these little intuitions that will come up. You know, those little gut feelings. We have them even when we don't practice mindfulness at times. You know, you're thinking of somebody and I should call them, and then they're calling you, or these little moments in the day. So as you start opening up to the present moment, you get access to your intuition. And that intuitive space to me is that place where you start co-creating with the spirit. And when we become aware of those little messages or gut feelings or whispers, that oftentimes, and to discern, to know that oftentimes opens up exactly what's needed. So my practice has evolved over time. Now I find myself getting up at 4:45 in the morning, and I sit and I breathe and I get connected and I go to gratitude. I do some yoga. I listen to those inner whispers. I write. I just channel whatever I hear. There's a whole practice. I do some hula dancing because I have a Hawaiian background. There's just so much, but that's the beginning. And then this is not just a formal practice. That's really important to name that. Mindfulness is also an informal practice, meaning it's not just a carved out period of time during the day. This comes down to, am I present in the conversation I'm having? Am I really with somebody? Or is my mind checked out? Am I really tasting my food, or am I checking my phone and changing the laundry at the same time, you know? Or am I really brushing my teeth right now? Or am I actually walking around my house aimlessly? You see, this is not that it's always a bad thing. It's when it's unconscious and it's like that sort of egoic conditioning takes over and you're in fear mode. It's like, no, bring yourself back to the moment at hand, because that's when you feel that presence. So that might give a little bit of insight into mindfulness practice from beginning to where it could evolve to.
I love
I
that.
go on, Yvonne.
I love that. I have a really great example of doing that with my kids actually. When they were younger and I would tell them to do something, I would look at them and I'd say, go downstairs to the big freezer, get some hamburger, bring it up and put it on the stove. And then I would say, what did I just say to you? And they would repeat back to me, because I was trying to teach them to not, because they're so being younger, not to wander with their thoughts, but to focus when I'm talking, right? And so I'd be like, what did I just say? And they would repeat back. And generally it was wrong, because, they were too busy worried about their video game, or they were, I have to check my social media. And so we just learned that when I look at you and I say something to you, right, you're listening, because I find that people are already formulating the response in their mind on how they're going to reply based on how they've experienced you in the past. And so
Right.
when they're already formulating that in their mind, they're not listening to anything that's coming out of your mouth. So
Yeah, that
that's
is
just a practice
powerful.
I've just started with I started with my kids a while ago. So now they know when I'm talking that to listen, but then they know when I'm talking in a different tone, they don't have to listen as seriously. So there's a tone that when I say something, it's now, do it. This is on this, like we have to do it. And then sometimes they can be on their phone as I'm talking, because it's not something they need to be listening fully to me at that moment. And so just teaching them to be aware of their surroundings. So go ahead,
What a
Luke. What were you going to
So
say?
good. No, I was gonna say, as you just said, Keith, about being more in tune with the presence. Do you know what I mean? Being more in tune with the moment. Have you ever had these intuitive moments in your life that you have no explanation for? And have you got a story that you could maybe share where the dots just connected in a unique way that just had to be gone?
Oh, I love
every
that.
day, every day. Luke, I
Yeah.
tell you, these things start happening. Wow, that's so awesome. You're asking that. I'll just share like one that happened today. So this
Yeah.
is
Okay.
like
Yeah.
very uncalculated. It just happened, but that's the point, I think, is that it is uncalculated. It just takes place. So I've been struggling a little bit as my business expands with how to financially pay for everything, because there's I'm bringing on new team members. I have a vision coming through from the spirit that feels so much bigger than myself. I can't contain it, and it requires me to let go of control, egoic control, honestly. And with it is coming up all my financial fears of, well, how am I going to get the money to actually make this vision happen? And I can feel myself going into old childhood patterns where there's not enough money. There's not going to be enough. And so I got a phone call this week from a coaching client of mine who said, I know this sounds weird, but I was wondering if you'd be open to being coached by me. And I thought, well, how vulnerable, but yes, I'd be totally open to it. It felt like I'm a yes guy, but I did feel the yes there. So we were on the phone this morning, and she was asking me all these details about my business and my money and my finances. And as we were talking, it kind of dawned on me that this was grace coming through from the spirit. She was reminding me of these principles around money that I already actually know or I've heard, but it was like getting embedded in a deeper way about giving and receiving. Actually, it's so funny because I pray this prayer, the St. Francis prayer, every day, and it's in giving that we receive. It's one of the lines in there. And with finances, it's all about that. It's like, it's not just about receiving and making money, but it's also about the giving of money and spending with the faith, knowing that it's just completely going to come back, and it's not about holding on, getting caught in that cog in the wheel. So we're talking about this, and as we're talking as well, I realized that I've been getting a little bit caught up in receiving money. I have some real inadequacy issues that have come up from my past, where it's like, who am I to ask for money? And I get really shy whenever it comes to selling anything that I've created. And I kind of get scared that people are going to think of me as this like sleazy sales guy. And it's like brutal. Right. And so I've just today, this manifestation of this client coaching through it. And what was really cool, the dot that connected here was, I had another coaching client this week that called me out of the blue for an emergency coaching session. And we were talking all about finances. That was actually the topic at hand. And she was saying, well, I just don't know if I can afford to, she's a coach as well. I don't know if I can afford to quit my job and be a full-time coach. She said, like, how much should I charge? And I said, well, at least $300. She says, you charge $300 an hour? I said, yes, I do. And I was just doing this session with her for free, but long story short, she ended up e-transferring me $300 this week. And I was refusing to deposit it. I felt like I shouldn't actually deposit this into the bank, because if I do, like, I feel like I'm taking advantage. It was this whole egoic trip. Yeah. So after this call today, the first thing I did is I went to the e-transfer and I deposited it with intention, going, this is also a lesson from the Holy Spirit saying you have to be open to receiving. And this isn't about your self-worth or you being a sleazy sales guy. You are opening up the hearts of people on the planet and doing the good work. And you need to continue to attract abundance to be able to see this vision through and prosper people that are going to be part of this vision as well. So it's, I don't know, this is the most recent connecting the dots. So hopefully that's resonant for you. I hope I'm not on a ramble here too much, but I'm just saying.
You are so not on a ramble.
Okay.
It's so good. It just makes me think about the principle of sowing and reaping. And it's so funny that you talk about the finances, because I've spoke about this experience before when, God gave me a vision that he wanted me to carry for him. And I remember putting a GoFundMe page on. And I was like, okay, God, if we're going to do this, let's partner, and I need the resources. And then I got an anonymous donation of £200 the first week.
Wow.
But then what I did feel is I felt that I was meant to sow this £200. And what was interesting is I spoke to one of my friends, and she just was starting out her own kind of ministry. And I felt like God was telling her to go and give everything that she had for free, like everything she'd already purchased for free, go and give it back out. And she was saying to me, like, Luke, I just don't know if I can do that, because then I won't be able to purchase like the materials again. It'll just finish. And I just said to her, I said, you need to go and do what you think God's telling you to do. So
Yeah.
she went and did it. And then I transferred the £200 to her. And she was like, what are you on about? And I said, God told me to give you this because you gave first. But then what was crazy is 2 weeks later, the same person anonymously donated the same amount of money back to me.
Wow.
And I messaged the woman and was like, why did you do that? And she went, God's proud of you. So I didn't know this woman at all. So yeah, I resonate with you massively, because we talk about it in the podcast, don't we, Yvonne? Like, we are here to provide value.
Yeah.
And when we are focused on providing value, whether that's through our gifting, whether that's through our uniqueness, the reward is that we get value back.
Yes.
But our focus has to be providing value. Our focus has to be sowing. And as we sow, we will reap. A lot of people, like you said, focus on how am I going to reap? How am I going to make? How am I going to do this? And first, our focus, this is a shift in mindset. No, how am I going to sow? How am I going to bring value into the world? So no, that was a perfect example. Thank you for that.
And
You're
I
welcome.
love it, because one of the things we see is that we think, okay, we give of our time, check. That's a good thing. We give of this, we give of that. But somehow along the way in our lives, in the years we've been on this planet, value looks like currency, right? Money. And we have made it dirty, right? And so when somebody says, let me gift you money, we go, oh no, because I didn't give you a transaction for it. We have made everything we value transactional, right? If I don't provide you with something, you can't give me money, because then I owe you, right? And so we've made it dirty. We've made the whole process, like unclean, instead of just going, for them, their value is being able to give money, right? And so when we go, no, we say we don't accept your value. And isn't that crazy? Because if I had money, I'd give it to people in a heartbeat, right? And so I always find it fascinating that, if people were to give me money, I'd be like, what do I owe you? Right. And then we have this transactional living way of life that we live, and the spirit doesn't act transactionally. It doesn't, right? It'll give, and it'll give because we are just value, period. We don't have to try to be value. We're just value, period. So it's, we have to change our own mindset to go, hey, it's okay because you are valuable enough to just receive without having to give of yourself also.
Wow. Those are some powerful words coming through. Thank you.
How do you, in terms of the practice of mindfulness, we spoke about, your example there, Keith, is money, right? Not being able to accept money, but that's rooted in, your belief around money, the way that you grew up, maybe your relationship with money. But money is just one example. It can be many different elements.
Yeah.
How have you found the practice of mindfulness in terms of that letting go? Is it a sense of letting go of the shame, the guilt? Is it changing a perspective? Is it getting a new concept of what that is, like a new truth? What is that for you?
Well, I play a little game with people whenever I'm leading keynotes or workshops, and I'll put up half a sentence on the PowerPoint screen, and I'll put up half sentences and ask people, how would you fill in the blanks to these sentences? And I'll put things like, my job is, money is, my career is, my to-do lists are, COVID is, love is. And then I break it down. I get to the words, I am. And, often in our culture, we ask people, how are you? And they say, I'm good. And then I'll ask, how are you really doing? And, oftentimes if you unpack it, it's like, well, I'm actually struggling, or I'm hurting, or I'm it's maybe I am joyful. But what I'm getting at here is all of those things that I'm mentioning are all just neutral statements. Money is, time, it just is. I am. Like they're just all neutralities. Like they just happen to exist right now in this moment. And how we're filling in the blank at the end of those sentences is the story we've chosen, I should say, to live into, the dream that we're choosing to live into. In the mindfulness framework, we say that everything begins as an inner dream in the imagination. And if you hear the word imagine, if you slow it down, there's two words in there: image in, imagine. And it's like, what are the thoughts that you're thinking about on a regular basis in your mind? Right. And I said this earlier, your thoughts building you up or beating you up. What are they? What's going on in there? We think up to 60,000 thoughts a day in our mind. And what we found is that 80% of those thoughts tend to be chronically repetitive, meaning we're thinking the same thing every single day. And a lot of that tends to be negativity and stories that we actually, if we heard it for somebody else, we would be like, oh my goodness, like, I'm so sorry that's happening for you. Yet we're like, oh, money's hard to come by. My love life sucks right now, or COVID. Oh, when's this going to end? So this powerful practice of mindfulness, of getting present to tune into, like, what is the story you're choosing to tell about all of these neutralities, can change in the present moment. You don't have to be stuck anymore telling yourself, I don't have enough time. If you catch yourself saying that and you don't like that story, it's like, pause, get still. And how do you want to think about time? Is there a poverty of time? Is there an abundance of time? What's the story? And so that's kind of another way to integrate this into your day, is the words we speak and the thoughts we're thinking have so much power in them, because they are actually manifesting into the world from that space of the inner dreamer, of that imagination where we co-create with the spirit of who we are. And boom, it shows up in the world. So I always say to people, if you want to change a story, start listening to what you're saying and what's causing you anxiety. And first step is to just change the story. Time is, I have so much time. And at first you might notice a lot of resistance from that egoic saboteur that comes up. And it's like, oh, well, come on, you just don't have enough time. That's reality. But you got to remember, you've been telling that story for a long time, over and over. So if you want to tell the new story, I have so much time. And then to actually, like, close your eyes and imagine that, like, imagine yourself in a space of the abundance of time and how it feels emotionally. There's a friend of mine, Joanne, who's a writing coach, and she always reads back her writing twice whenever she writes. She reads it once for her mind and once for her heart. And I love that, because we're not only tapping into the thinking, but in order to really manifest, it's like to get into your feeling center is so important too. I mean, people have been asking me lately, where do you live? And, I often say, oh, I live in Winnipeg, but I've been manifesting, like, I really do belong in Maui, Hawaii from January to April. So when people say, where do you live right now? I say, I live in Hawaii. They say, you live in Hawaii? I say, I live in Hawaii. They're like, where do you live? I say, I live on Kaanapali Beach. And they like, really? And I say, yes, I do. And I believe that is a wish already fulfilled. It's just, I've got to the dots to live into it, but it's here. So that's all. And again, a lot to unpack, but I would say that's how you would probably integrate mindfulness in that sense into, what you're thinking about.
Love
I
that.
love that. Both of us, we both love that. Hey,
Yeah.
it's so good. And it's really good, because I have here a couple of verses here. Proverbs 15:4, gentle words bring life and health. A deceitful tongue crushes the spirit. Proverbs 16:24, kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy for the body. And Proverbs 18:4, a person's words can be life-giving water. Words of true wisdom are as refreshing as a bubbling brook. And it's so powerful. And it actually, this is one of those meant to be moments, Keith, that Luke and I have been sharing this whole journey. We are on episode 14. We started out before, but in January, we really felt it was so important. We talked about the path that people are on and how to get on the path, right? Jesus is, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and diving into that and what that looked like. And then, of course, we went into talking about hearing from God and why is so important. And everything you're saying lines up, because the power of the tongue is like the words that come out of your mouth are so powerful.
Mhm.
And the reason why they're so powerful is because when you align them with God, they are life giving. They're so life giving. And when we speak life over ourselves, we become more alive. But when we speak death over ourselves, we die. And not in a physical way, but internally, we die. Our dreams are crushed, our souls are crushed. We just feel like we can't go on anymore. And so when you are full of life, you're full of health and you're speaking life over yourself, and then you go, as you have been doing, is speaking life over other people, you're allowing people to see how they were actually supposed to be. And then they get a taste of something that they'd never had before, and it awakens something inside of them, and they go searching for it because something happened. They go, I didn't know it could be this way. And so, I love it. It so ties into everything. We spoke about value. We've talked about hearing God, and talking about mindfulness has been spot on, because there's something happening in the world right now where people are searching for authenticity. And authenticity comes from internally inside yourself. And you won't be able to find it if you're not writing the right story that God has originally placed on you. So, yeah, I am so in love with this episode.
I'm falling in love with it too.
If you could give our listeners one piece of advice to move forward from today's episode, one little nugget, what would it be?
Well, there's a saying from ancient Hawaii. And as you can tell, I've been referencing Hawaii because I live there. And in ancient Hawaii, people would greet each other and they would say, "Ika pono mea, ika pono mea." And translated into English loosely, it means everything is happening perfectly on time. And so isn't that a beautiful greeting? Like to meet and say,
Yeah.
we're meeting here perfectly on time. Like it's a divine appointment that we've crossed
Mm.
paths, and that the timing of this podcast and all that's been awakening, I've been really thinking about that. So if I were to give some advice, I would probably root it right now in this place of wherever you're at on your road to Damascus. It's like it's happening perfectly on time, even if it doesn't seem like it. It really is. Like, have you ever considered like the most annoying people in your life have so much to teach you? And in fact, they're showing up perfectly on time so that you'll get the lesson of like, oh, I need to practice compassion or patience or tolerance, or maybe I need to practice being really direct and telling them what I really think for once in my life, right? These people are playing a role to help you. Those moments of struggle, of challenge, have you ever noticed those moments are when we do our greatest growth, like when we actually
Yeah.
evolve into what we're supposed to be? So no matter where you're at, and if you're in the flow right now and you're feeling the aliveness, just be in gratitude, ikapono me as well. Like everything is happening on time, and when we're present in the moment and we're integrating mindfulness, all we have to do is look, and we will see what we need, whether it's the tree outside my window right now being blown in the wind, waving a little wave to me, or the bird that comes onto the windowsill and just smiles and chirps. Or yesterday I was about 7 a.m. just doing a powerful meditation prayer, and all of a sudden this chain of 5 deer, all really close together, just walked by my front window. And these signs are everywhere in the moment, and you get those chills down the spine. It's like gentle rain coming down your spine, the spirits just blessing you. That is what it's all about to me. So advice, ikapono mea. Pay attention. Stop making your to-do lists and come back to the moment at hand. And remember, like, this moment is your moment of power. Everything is alive, aware, and responsive, and wants to support you in your journey towards being a channel of the spirit here on earth.
Wow. That is some great, great parting words for our guests. If you have loved this episode here, go to our Instagram, drop a like. But what I want you to do also is, while you're on our Instagram, go to Damascus Experience and like that one, and then go right over to Keith Macpherson, and you're going to love his Instagram. You're going to heart it. You're going to follow him because he drops some real nuggets of truth every day in his mindfulness every morning. There's something in there for you to read. So if you can't get to those 20 minutes of mindfulness, you're just learning to build it, grab onto that motivation he drops every day and sit on that. If you want, you're going to look, he has a link for his book, I think in his Instagram. You want to grab that book too, and you want to check it out if you want to dive deeper into mindfulness. So Keith, thank you so much for coming on our show today. We have greatly appreciated it.
Yvonne, Luke, you are masterful at this, and it's been an honor. I don't know how you pull out those quotes from the Bible so quickly. It's like unbelievable. And wow, what grace to just spend this time together. And thank you.
Yes, thank you for our divine appointment. Okay, Luke, it was a pleasure as always.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me, a guest on our podcast. So yes, thank you for joining us today on the Road to Damascus.
And we will see you next week. Bye.